Dear friends, today in this session we shall discuss on biodiversity, its concept and evolution. It's a part of course MSD012 Ecosystem and Natural Resources. And we are going to touch upon the basic concept of biodiversity, its levels and evolution of biodiversity in this session. As we know that nearly 3/4, that is 71% of the Earth's surface is covered by marine waters. These have an average depth of about 3.8 kilometers. And the whole of this region, comprising virtually all the water on the planet, is theoretically capable of supporting active life. Oceans and seas thus make up the vast majority of the volume of the biosphere and by far the most extensive but most poorly known main ecosystem type. However, the amount of living material in most of the sea, that part of the often ocean below the upper 100 or so meter, is very low compared with many terrestrial habitats. Only 2 to 3% of the total world water, that world water by volume, is non-saline in one side. Of that, around 2/3 of that 3% is locked as ice, and around 1/3 is, it's available as a groundwater in the upper layers of the Earth's crust. As we know that surface waters, means surface phase waters, that is available in lakes, rivers and wetlands. They hold the vanishingly small volume of water that remain on the Earth, but this small amount supports an important sector of global biodiversity. For example, about 40% of the more than 25,000 species of fish known in the world that occurs in this freshwater, and many isolated water systems like lakes, and have large number of species that is not found anywhere else in the world. Again, the land that bears the wide diversity of terrestrial ecosystem that humans are most familiar with, as well as surface freshwaters, it covers less than 1/3 of the Earth's surface, that is about 29% of the Earth's surface. Of that, half of this is below 500 meter elevation, and if you look at the global average elevation is only about 800 meters. So most of the world, that land surface is situated in the northern hemisphere. And we know that the amount of north of the Tropic of Cancer that is slightly exceeds than in the rest of the world combined. This distribution of world's that species is uneven and incomplete. So the single most obvious pattern in global biodiversity is that overall species richness trend to increase towards the equator. So there are more species in total, and per unit area in the tropics than in temperate region. Again, temperate region has more species than polar region. So this variation in species number is strongly correlated with global variation in incidence of energy and water availability. What is biodiversity? If you look into this term biodiversity, the simple meaning is diversity in biological species, living beings. As per the definition of biodiversity given in the Convention on Biological Diversity under Article 2, biodiversity or biological diversity means the variability among living organisms from all sources, including inter alia, what we are talking about, the terrestrial, marine, other aquatic ecosystem, and the ecological complexes of which they are part. That includes the diversity within the species, between the species, and of the ecosystems. So it can be looked, this biodiversity can be looked into three main levels, as we sometimes call it a component of biodiversity. They are genetic diversity, species diversity, and ecosystem diversity. Then the question comes, what is genetic diversity? If you go if you are from a rural area, and if you go in your village or in your region, you will find out a varieties of rice with different threads. Then if you go in a garden or in a park, you will find out varieties of roses with different colors. And cows of different breeds, buffaloes of different breeds, that have different productivity. So this kind of characteristic of biodiversity, this level of biodiversity is termed as genetic diversity. Then the second one is species diversity. And we have seen the spectacular differences in form, size, and other features among different species. For example, what we're talking about, cows, buffaloes, goat, horses among the animals. And in the plants you have seen in front of you, that is half shrub trees. In the half and shrub trees also, different variety of species. And this level of biodiversity is termed as species diversity. The third level of biodiversity is ecosystem diversity. Now you have seen that there are striking differences among large aggregates of habitats of different species that occupies large area, but with some common distinctive features as we call as ecosystem. So you have seen that large distinctive feature that ecosystem as forest, desert, inland waters, as well as you see that coastal and marine areas. This diversity of ecosystem is termed as ecosystem diversity. You will see here that marine ecosystem, then that hill ecosystem. So then again, in this ecosystem diversity can be looked into from three perspectives. One is alpha diversity, second is beta, third is gamma diversity. Alpha, beta, and gamma diversity. So alpha diversity indicates the diversity within the community or ecosystem. You note down the diversity within the community or ecosystems. So it refers to the diversity of organisms sharing the same community or habitat. Right. So the combination of species richness means availability of species and evenness or equitability, that is used or represent alpha diversity of that community or habitat. Right. Again, then beta diversity indicates diversity between communities or ecosystem. As you know, a species frequently changes when habitat or community changes. And if you look into this, here in these photos, you will find out that there are marked differences in species composition of communities along environmental gradients, like altitudinal gradients. Would change the altitudinal gradient, also you will find out gradients, the moisture gradients, and other environmental gradients. So whenever there are changes in environmental gradients or different environmental gradients, you will of course definitely will find out that change in species composition. So, the higher the heterogeneity in that habitat in the region that exhibit higher better diversity, right? When we talk about alpha diversity, that is diversity in an ecosystem. Here, in ecosystem, with change in environment gradients, change in characteristics or attributes, you will see marked differences in changes in composition of species. That is better diversity. Then, on the other hand, gamma diversity, that refers to the diversity of the habitats over the total landscape or geographical area. You will see in a total landscape or geographical area, you will find out different ecosystems. So, the combined the diversity of species in that different ecosystem in that region is called that gamma diversity. Let us take an example. Let us say a mountain slope as a landscape. There you will find out that different patches of forest, grassland, agricultural land. Here, in this case of that mountain slope as a landscape, as our landscape, for to understand this that ecosystem diversity. Here, the alpha diversity is the species diversity present within each forest, grassland, or agricultural patch of the slope. And the beta diversity is represented by the species diversity between any two patches and their communities. While gamma diversity of that landscape is the species diversity along the entire range of that mountain slope. So this is how we have to understand or differentiate different perspective of that ecosystem diversity. That is alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity. Then, as we know that, we have seen that the biodiversity is diversity in biological living banks. And how it was evolved. As we know that, or we learned that formation of planet Earth took place around 4.5 billion years ago, when a part of the sun separated from it. The first living organism appeared in the ocean is about 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. They were, that term is prokaryote, that's like bacteria-like organism, which they do not have, these prokaryotes do not have any cell organelles and nucleus, and they feed on the organic compounds dissolved in the water. Then the first eukaryotic organism, they were formed around 1.8 billion years ago. Then again in 1.1 billion years ago, the simple asexual reproductive strategy, which was followed by eukaryotic or prokaryotic plants, were replaced, organism, not plants, organism, were replaced with more complicated process called sexual reproduction that is basically based on DNA repairing mechanism. As we know that around 600 million years ago, the first multicellular algae, as we call as metazoan, were recorded, which was followed by first invertebrate metazoan. So then suddenly a burst in speciation means the creation of new species from the existing species occur. That leads to the evolution of the first primitive fish and vertebrates. That is, that fish or animal with internal skeletons that takes place about 500 million years ago. Until 500 million years ago, life forms existed only in water. That may be because the water could shield them from ultraviolet radiation. At the same time, at high altitude in the atmosphere, the oxygen molecule started forming ozone molecule, that is O3, from O2 oxygen molecule to ozone, by absorbing the high energy content of the ultraviolet radiation. So in this course of time, the large quantities of ozone were accumulated in the higher strata of the atmosphere and created a shield against the harmful effects of UV radiation. So with the formation of this protective ozone layer, organisms, they started to living towards land or living on the land. About 440 million years ago, the first plants that followed by invertebrates and vertebrates started to colonize the land. So slow fusion on the same time, there was slow fusion of continents into a single landmass, as we call it Pangaea, and reduced the length of coastline and coastal habitat availability, and thus motivated the organism to move towards the terrestrial landmasses. However, all marine phyla attempted or succeeded in doing so. The most successful group that developed on land is in an enormous variety of similar form is the insect. So around about 200 million years ago, then plate tectonics, the geological phenomenon that accounted for the steep rise in diversity. That steep rise in diversity is due to the fragmentation of the earth that caused by the breakup of that Pangaea, the only supercontinent existing in that time, that's Pangaea that is fragmented into 7 continents of the present world. So, this form a variety of terrestrial and aquatic biogeographical barriers, that formation of that 7 continents, that effectively isolated previously connected population and thus increased the rate of speciation. Moreover, the process also created huge spatial diversity in terms of geographical and climatic parameters that resulted into evolution of rich biodiversity across the globe. As you know, speciation or diversity in living banks is because of the availability of water and other important factors. So the past 400 million years are marked by periodic massive loss of biodiversity or diversity known as mass extinction events. So during the last several thousand years, in the meantime, during the last several thousand years, humans have drastically modified the environment that's severely depleting the species diversity. Today, approximately, we assume that we are able to identify 1.7 to 1.8 million species, mostly small creatures such as insects. And most of the scientists hold the view that there are 3 to 100 million species in the biosphere. Based on the Global Biodiversity Outlook that was published in 2000, the present status of the biodiversity in the world, it's about 1.75 million species that have been described, and there are good grounds for believing that several million more species exist, but we are not able to, or we can say that it's remain undiscovered and undescribed. Right? You see in this table that describes species kingdom-wise and estimated total species kingdom-wise. This is this is from the Global Biodiversity Assessment Report 1. Global Environmental Outlook 1. We know that the biomass of the world's vegetation has halved over human history. And the forests now that span only 68% of their pre-industrial extent. Although the rate of forest loss has slowed globally since the 1980s, but it is still rapid in many tropical regions And the increased extent of temperature in boreal forest has been accompanied by increased fragmentation and changes in function. As a result of human impacts, terrestrial ecological communities worldwide are estimated to have lost more than 20% of their original biodiversity on average. In the ocean, animal population and habitat extent have declined in 20th century, with more than 20 described marine species having gone extinct. And some more they must have been extinct before we describe them. So the number of species currently threatened with extinction is unprecedented in human history, and it's estimated that 1 million species of animals and plants may be there. If you look here, based on publication by group of scientists under Dice et al., the extinction risks and diversity in different taxonomic groups is, you will find here, if you look into this photograph or this picture, approximate number of described species of animals, plants and fungi you will see here in the bar. That first bar, that fungi, plant, invertebrate and vertebrate with approximate number. Right. And the proportion of species that are threatened with extinction, that shows in the pie chart in groups that have been globally assessed for the IUCN red list. So we'll see here, on average across these all groups, approximately 25% of species are threatened. Then you are moving from species to population, you will see that wild animal population are continually to decline on land and in sea. So in addition, rapid evolutionary responses to human drivers are now seen in all major taxonomic groups. This includes the evolution of resistance to pesticides and herbicides in insects and plants, smaller size and earlier maturation in marine fishes and invertebrates subject to fishing and global warming, changes in freeze tolerance in urban plants, and phenological shifts in a wide range of taxa in response to this climate change. So the point here, what we have discussed is that still, if you look from evolutionary point of view, the evolution of biodiversity with the intervention or because of our human intervention also, the process of evolution is taking place. That's why you will see number of that species, they evolve themselves as a resistance to pesticide, herbicide, especially in insects and plants. So in this session, what we have discussed is the basic concept of biodiversity and its evolution, and present a brief overview on the present status of biodiversity. Thanks all. Looking forward. Let us meet in next session. Thank you. And these are some of the references which I defend for this presentation. Thank you very much.